All right, hypothesis testing 3, errors in hypothesis testing. When we draw conclusions based on probabilities, we are always leaving ourselves open to making errors, and that's fine, that's part of the process, but we have specific names for some of those errors that I'll go over. This sort of table is, you know, is pretty much part of any statistics exam that's ever been given. It's on the left-hand side, we have what's actually happening in the population. Keep in mind, we don't know this, but what's actually happening in the population is it's either that the null hypothesis is true or it's false. One of the two things is correct. Our statistical decision, that's the conclusion that we come to, whether we reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject it. Those are our two options. You can see in this table, that produces 4 different possible outcomes. Okay, the first one on the top is what we call a type 1 error, or a false positive. We rejected the null hypothesis when the null hypothesis was actually true. So we made an error there. Now, this isn't us doing something wrong. This is just what's going to happen because we're basing our conclusions on probabilities. The next piece, fail to reject when the null hypothesis is actually true. There's no name for this because it's not at all exciting, but that would be a correct decision. Down below, we have a couple of things that can happen. We can have a correct decision to reject the null hypothesis when it is in fact false. The name for this is power, or statistical power. And then finally, we could fail to reject the null hypothesis when the null is actually false, and that's called a type 2 or a beta error. Now, again, type 1 error, falsely rejecting a null hypothesis, false positive, sometimes called an alpha error. Type 2, failing to reject a false null hypothesis, a false negative, sometimes called a beta error. We can apply this to a practical example, say pregnancy tests. The null hypothesis here would be not pregnant. The alternative hypothesis would be pregnant. Those are the two things that can happen here. Test result. Reject the null. That would reflect a test result that was positive, a test result that said, yes, you are pregnant. Well, two things can be happening. If the null hypothesis was actually true and the person is not pregnant, that's a false positive. Or you're actually pregnant and the test correctly confirmed that. That's power, or a correct decision. Failing to reject the null, this is when the test says, no, you're not pregnant. Well, it could be correct when you're not pregnant, but if you were actually pregnant, that would be a false negative. It would be the wrong result. Interestingly, most tests say if you get a no, try again in a couple of days. If you get a yes, go see your doctor. What that's suggesting is that it's very possible to have a false negative because you haven't timed it correctly, but it's pretty rare to get a false positive. And even if it is a false positive, you should still go see your doctor because you're almost certainly pregnant. And just to review, type 1 error, false positive. Doctor's telling this man he's pregnant. Type 2 error, false negative. Doctor is telling this very pregnant woman that she is not pregnant.